Hey guys, welcome to the Bourboneering podcast. I'm your host, Austin. Let's get started. So today I'm with Macaulay Williams. He is the president and CEO of BR Distilling, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and we're doing a distillery highlight today. And if y'all seen in the past, sometimes I get some guests on, sometimes I don't. But we're going to go through the distillery, some of the history, anything Macaulay wants to tell us about it. And of course, we're going to go through the whiskeys and give y'all a little heads up about what they have and what they're doing in the future. So let's get started. So Macaulay, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. It's through initiatives like this that we get our name out there, so I really appreciate that. Yeah, so we're BR Distilling in Memphis, Tennessee, founded in 2013. I'm actually a mergers and acquisitions security by training, so I like to say I'm a recovering attorney. I left the practice of law in 2017 to take on the president and CEO role at this distillery. Previously, the group before us had done vodka at the distillery. And in 2017, my co-founders and I bought a defunct vodka distillery, converted it over to do whiskey and to become a whiskey distillery. So we make bourbon, Tennessee whiskey, and rye whiskey at our facility. Our flagship brands are Bluenote bourbon and Riverset rye. We're in Memphis, Tennessee, so both of our brands, Bluenote and Riverset, are inherently Memphis or Delta themed. Bluenote is named after the Memphis Blues, and Riverset is named after the fact that Memphis is set along the banks of the mighty Mississippi, and we play up the importance of the river in the early whiskey trade with that brand.
Awesome. Yeah. Y'all have heard me review a single barrel from Bluenote before. And as if you've heard the show before, you know, I love it. I actually have one of their new releases, the Juke Joint bourbon, and also have some Riverset. So y'all be hearing about that later, but spoiler alert, they're fantastic. So you kind of did this. You gave a history of the brand. So tell me a little bit about, let's go deep dive into, let's start with Riverset. You want to tell us a little bit more about the rye?
Yeah. So we created Riverset in 2018, in the fall of 2018, in terms of the initial release of the product. Riverset is a 4-year-old Tennessee rye whiskey, 95% rye, 5% malted barley on the mash bill. It's gone through a couple of different iterations in terms of package, but we feel like we've nailed it. And you probably have the most recent package, which features the gold embossed riverboat. Yeah, that's the one. So Riverset is going to be a different rye whiskey than what maybe some of your listeners are used to. I think it's pretty cool because it's great for folks that are really into rye in that it's a different rye, so they appreciate that difference. But then also it's very approachable to folks that are newer to rye whiskey because it does not have the intense minty dill or really intense spice note on it. So on Riverset, you're going to get a pretty cool balance of your vanillins from the barrel, your vanilla flavors that meet a crisp cinnamon apple flavor. So you do get some of that cinnamon allspice note, but it's going to be paired nicely with like a very crisp, refreshing green apple note, and then mellowed both on the front and then finish with that oak vanilla flavor. In most of our markets, this product retails for about $29.99. So relative to price, if you look at quality relative to price, we think it's one of the best, if not the best rye whiskey on the market for its value, for its price. Like I said earlier, Riverset's named after the fact that Memphis is set along the banks of the Mississippi River. We feature a riverboat as our symbol for this brand because riverboats were used to transport the cumbersome barrels up and down the rivers to get it to the population centers. So, right, whiskey was distilled mostly in the hinterlands of the country, out in the farmlands, way away from the urban centers. And distilleries, distilled grain early on to make use of excess grain and prevent it from spoiling. So it was not created out of a desire to build, whiskey brands so much as it was a necessity to preserve the grain they had harvested. And anyways, it was sort of a form of currency on the frontier, as I'm sure you've read in your whiskey heritage books. But eventually they learned to put the whiskey into barrels, right, to add color and flavor. But then getting the barrels of whiskey from the farmlands, the hinterlands, to the East Coast or to the urban centers was a really big problem. And this is obviously before the rail system had been developed and long before the interstate system. So the river, no matter where they were in the country, is how they would get it. to the population centers, which is predominantly on the East Coast, whether they were along the Ohio River Valley up in Kentucky and Pennsylvania, or they were along the Missouri River Valley going a little further westward. Either way, that all funnels down into the Mississippi River, past Memphis, and then on down to New Orleans. And then they'd get put on ocean ferry ships and go around Florida and up the East Coast. But anyways, the river system was really important for the early distribution of whiskey. The river boat, the steamboat, was, of course, like the final great invention that allowed people to go up and down the river easily. And so we really want to pay homage to that heritage that our city has, and also that the importance that device, the steamboat, has in the early transport of whiskey. And we actually use that symbol, the steamboat, as a symbol of blazing your own trail, or our tagline is "Go against the current," meaning that once you introduce a steam engine to a boat, you can no longer just float downriver and try to paddle back upriver. You can actually easily or more easily go upriver. And so going against the current, we use that as sort of blazing your own trail, beating to your own drum, et cetera, type mentality to show folks that, rye is, of course, different than bourbon. It's a little more niche than bourbon. It's going against the current if you're drinking rye anyways. And then, of course, there's kind of the homage to the past, go against the current, et cetera. So we think it's a pretty cool name. It's a good story, but most importantly, we think we have a really quality product, and we think we've nailed the quality relative to price ratio to give drinkers a great, affordable rye whiskey. It's bottled at 93 proof, too. I'll look that off.
Yeah, I was about to say my first tasting note on that was apple, like you were saying, like a crisp cinnamon apple. And I have an apple brandy that I haven't tried it side by side, but I kind of want to, because it's very, very interesting. And I think you're right. You nailed it for the quality to price ratio. This, for under $30, this is by far the best rye I've ever had. Not that I'm as experienced in rye as I am in bourbon. I'm definitely not an expert in either of those, but I think it's fantastic. It's completely different. Like you said, like I get put off by some ryes because of like the dill note and things like that.
Yep.
And it's refreshing. It's really good. I love the heritage behind it. I had no idea. Obviously, I've seen the label, and that's really cool. And y'all, I have these bottles on my Instagram, so you can hop on there to actually see them. But it's a beautiful label. And I didn't know the price going into this. I kind of wanted to go in blind. I would never have guessed the price point on that.
Sure. And so that's something we're like laser focused on, is to deliver really high quality products for an affordable price, because we want to be a brand that's approachable by all levels of drinkers, no matter socioeconomic class, or whether they are like hardcore collectors or folks that just like to drink whiskey. So with Riverset and then our Bluenote Juke Joint, I like to say they're drinking whiskeys. They're really meant to be appealing to anybody. And we really wanted to also come up with a flavor profile that was different and unique to stand out. So many folks have that heavy mint dill, really intense allspice note on their rye. And with rye whiskey being the fastest growing category of American whiskey, we wanted to, carve out our own, market share, if you will, in terms of the flavor spectrum, and have something that we created that was uniquely ours.
I think y'all did just that. It's an awesome rye, and I'm way more of a bourbon fan than I am rye, and I think you're starting to convince me otherwise with this. But let's move on to Bluenote. Talk about that, and maybe specifically the Juke Joint, but maybe Bluenote in general as well.
Yeah, so Bluenote, as a brand, has several different iterations or versions. So under our Bluenote brand, I'll start from the top and work our way down in terms of price. So within the Bluenote brand, we have our store pick single barrel selects. So that's our Bluenote single barrel reserve. That is 9 through 11, and we have done some up to 15-year-old releases under that label, but typically 9 through 11-year-old cask strength Tennessee bourbon releases. The suggested retail price on that, depending on the market, is going to be between $59 and $64.99, depending on state tax, et cetera. And that's bottled at barrel proof or cask strength. So you're going to get the yield that the barrel yields, and it's going to come out at whatever barrel proof or cask strength that barrel is. Proofs are going to range from anywhere as low as 99 proof to as high as like 117 is kind of the spectrum we've seen. But that's really fun. And you mentioned you had that Carruthers pick from Nashville, because obviously single barrels are unique. So you're going to get the most variance from store pick to store pick in terms of any of our iterations having variance in the picks. So that's the single barrel reserve at 59, call it MSRP, and then we have our flagship premium small batch, which is a 9-year age stated Tennessee bourbon that's bottled at 93 proof. 93 proof, sort of our house signature proof point. So it's a premium emphasis on small batch because we only do 20 barrels per batch, minimum age of 9 years, like I said. That's really where we cut our teeth into the whiskey market. We wanted to over deliver again on quality relative to price. That's a $49.99 product in most markets. For $49, there's a lot of bourbons you're going to get that have a good amount of things as young as 2-year-old in it. This is a 9-year age stated, which means the youngest barrel in the blend has to be at least 9 years. That's a proprietary blend of 2 mash bills, 70% corn, 22% rye, 8% malted barley blended, with 84% corn, 8% rye, 8% malted barley. So you will find variance in batch to batch on that, right? It's a small batch, i.e. consumer beware that there can be a little variance in taste. But one thing we like to say is that the quality is always the same. So we're really focused on delivering the same quality batch to batch, knowing that just with that few of barrels mingled together, you're going to have natural taste variance. And then we have our Bluenote Juke Joint, which is quickly becoming our number one seller, which is our $29.99 bourbon. It's actually a Kentucky bourbon that we've worked on contract to produce our proprietary mash bill that we age, blend, and bottle in Memphis, bottled at 93 proof. We think the Bluenote Juke Joint has national appeal potential. It's selling really well in a lot of markets. We think we can compete with the major brands at that price point and with the quality of none of our products are chill filtered. We want to leave in those fatty oils for the viscosity. But if Bluenote, the brand, is named after the Memphis Blues, the blues are really born in bars or establishments called juke joints, which similar to a honky tonk, but for blues music. And that's where folks from all walks of life would come to hear, really amazing music played from unassuming characters that aren't dressed up really fancy. And, it's a come as you are type environment. There's typically good barbecue or other good food, good cheeseburgers, fried chicken. Just good old down home cooking. And it's a place where you can let loose and have, unbridled fun. And that's something that we wanted to capture with this brand in terms of like the music or the food and an atmosphere at a juke joint. We wanted to be authentic. We wanted it to be quality, and we wanted the quality of what's inside the bottle to be better than any sort of packaging or gimmick. We wanted to over deliver on that, and hopefully we did. So the Bluenote Juke Joint is really one of our products. We're very proud of every single one of them, but that's one that's very near and dear to the heart because the genesis of that product from the whiskey inside the bottles perspective is we as a team had a really difficult time finding bottles of whiskey, American whiskey, would be bourbon, Tennessee whiskey, or rye that we liked that were sub $30. We found a handful of brands that did an okay job at delivering a product of quality below $30. What we found was that they were very monotone in flavor. The ones that were good even just kind of had one taste that dominated the overall flavor profile. And ultimately, a sophisticated whiskey drinker palate becomes very bored with a monotone type flavor profile, right? People are seeking complexity in the product. And so we wanted to, again, create something that could be appealing to, whiskey aficionados and collectors from a complexity standpoint and overall taste profile, but then also be drinkable enough, smooth enough, so to speak, for folks that just like to drink a whiskey and Coke or a simple cocktail, or that want to mix it, or folks that are newer to whiskey. So again, always trying to balance that quality relative to price, and then also balance that drinkability that allows folks, maybe that aren't as familiar with, high dollar whiskeys to feel like they can get involved and can kind of get on the bandwagon with the rest of us and, bringing back bourbon and American whiskeys to hopefully one day outsell vodka and some of the other light spirits like they used to. So we're really proud of it. It's our drinking whiskey, and the tagline for that one is "It's smoother than smooth."
I love that. And I love the history behind your brands. Now, I'm from Baton Rouge, which is, close to New Orleans.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of similarities with New Orleans and Memphis, I'm saying, with, the connection to the river, as well as music. I mean, obviously, Memphis has got the blues, New Orleans more jazz. But just those similarities and those connections to heritage kind of they hit home for someone in the Louisiana area, at
For
least.
sure.
And I mean, I agree. This is a great bourbon. I don't take samples and talk good about them just because I can. Now, if I don't like something, I won't put it out there necessarily.
Sure.
But this, I mean, from first sip, this blew me away. I was already a fan from the single barrel, but both of these whiskeys for the age and for the price point, I think are incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
this is really surprising almost for such a, I guess, at least from around here, it seems like a smaller brand.
Sure. No, and that's the thing is ultimately, we are a craft distillery, and I want to stay a craft distillery in the sense of the word craft, meaning quality and niche, and the emphasis on over delivering on taste. But we have no desire to stay a craft distillery if that word means small, micro, or hyper regional. So the goal is to build a national craft brands, right? We want to be national brands, but never forget where we came from, and then also never forget that it was ultimately the quality relative to price of our products that got us there. So we are looking at a national focus, but building out regionally. And then I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm really glad you said about the brand motifs or the genre, like the blues, the Delta, the blue, all of that resonating, and the river resonating with you, because that's the goal. Is while we are rooted in Memphis, we want these overall brand themes and the general backdrop of the brands and the mood that you feel when you drink them and you see our marketing to be bigger than just Memphis. We want it to be we want it to encompass Memphis, the Mississippi Delta, New Orleans, and even up to St. Louis and out to Kansas City and Chicago, right? There's something that these center of the country cities, from Chicago down to St. Louis to Memphis, down through the Mississippi Delta, all the way to Baton Rouge and New Orleans, they have in common. And that is this heritage that's rooted in the blues and jazz, right? Blues and jazz are like brother, sister, genres of music, right? They're both born actually out of the invention of the Blue Note. The Blue Note is an actual music note. That is the melding or combination of multiple notes. It was developed by early blues and jazz pickers in the Louisiana and Mississippi and Tennessee deltas. And it was because they were actually improperly playing the instruments to make their own sounds. And it's called the trebled note because it's that note in blues or jazz that gives that twang sound. It's almost one of those notes that you feel the passion behind it more than you can really identify it just by like writing it. You kind of have to hear it to know it. And we wanted to have a name that, stood for something, but then also has a double entendre for whiskey, because there's tasting notes. And if you think about a combination or melding of multiple notes together to create a more complex sound, that's exactly what's going on inside the barrel and then inside the bottle with a good whiskey, right? Is it's not just one taste, it's the combination of all these flavors. And so for the Blue Note Juke Joint, like I said, it's fun to drink, but you're going to get a full roller coaster of flavor in there. We get everything from melon to pear to apricot. Obviously, you're going to get your vanillins, your vanilla flavors from the oak, and then you definitely get some of the rye spice on there. But I really, really love that product because it's done exactly what we designed it to do from a flavor perspective, is that every time you taste it, you taste something different, right? And that's what makes the more, studied or aficionado type drinker like yourself keep coming back to it, right? And maybe you get bored with some of the other big name brands. They're not bad by any means. It's just there's that one taste over and over, and you kind of want to move on. That's what I love about the really complex, expensive whiskeys, is just the sheer complexity of the taste.
Yeah, I forgot who said it, and I'm going to misquote it, but someone said you buy a bottle for its story and you buy it again for what's in the bottle. But I think y'all done a great job of combining both, because obviously y'all have a passion for the Memphis area and, the heritage that's living there. Yet you also have a passion for whiskey and making a good product. And I like I said, I'm blown away by these products here. It's been surprising because I've had, there's craft distilleries out there that make a 2-year-old whiskey, and it's their own thing, so it's great, but you kind of subpar in the flavor department. Y'all kind of have the best of both worlds, the story behind it and actual great product. Well, that brings me, is there anything else you want to talk about distillery wise? Maybe, anything y'all are planning?
Sure. Well, first, if I could, I would like to hit a little bit about the process.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. Go ahead.
some of the things that we stand for. So, we only use 53-gallon cooperage, which is the traditional industry standard whiskey barrel, American whiskey barrel. All of our barrels are made from, obviously, they're charred on the inside, made from American white oak. But I emphasize the size of the cooperage because there is something that I don't know that anybody's been able to explain exactly why or how it works. There's something about the volume to surface area ratio that balances perfectly in 53-gallon cooperage that you don't get in smaller barrels that a lot of other craft or upstart distilleries use. So if you use a smaller gallonage barrel, like a 30-gallon barrel or a 20-gallon barrel, even one of the little smaller ones, what you do is you distort the volume to surface area ratio on the inside. And what happens is it gets the right color, meaning it extracts the oak color in some of those vanilla flavors, but it doesn't get the balancing of oxygenation. So there's two main pillars to maturation. In the barrels, of course, where all the magic happens with whiskey. That's where Mother Nature's doing her work. And you have to balance that extracting the color and flavor with oxygenation. And somehow there's that perfect harmony in a 53-gallon barrel that the major guys discovered a long time ago. And so other people have tried to mess with that, and it just doesn't work. And also really emphasizing Mother Nature and the maturation process is in Memphis. We are, of course, in Tennessee. So we have the terroir, as they like to say in wine, of being the right sense of place. Whiskey is known from coming from Tennessee and, of course, Kentucky as well. But what we also have is a perfect climate for aging whiskey, and it's no BS. We average around 5 to 6 degrees warmer than Middle Tennessee or North Central Kentucky every day of the year. So we're a little bit hotter. And so we're also a little bit more humid because we're right along the banks of the river in what's called the Mississippi Delta. And so there's that balance of a little bit extra heat and a little bit higher humidity that really make our maturation process special. And it really shows. And so again, just to harp on some technicalities, is in order to extract, that extraction phase of maturation, that only occurs at temperatures 55 degrees Fahrenheit and above. And then oxygenation, which refers to the barrel contracting and sucking in oxygen, only occurs at a material level in 55 degrees or below. So extraction hot months, oxygenation cold months. And so folks out in Texas have a very much different climate than Tennessee because it even gets hotter and it's less humid in parts. And like out in the mountain states, it's just a whole different geographical element. And so what we think is we have the traditional seasons that you would see over in Middle Tennessee and in North Central Kentucky. We're just a little bit warmer and a little bit more humid. So we're not too many standard deviations away from the norm. We think it's just kind of a perfect harmony of that. And then lastly, I would emphasize our water. So you're going to hear that on all of your Middle Tennessee or Kentucky whiskey or bourbon tours. They talk about their limestone water and the calcium content of the water. Now, I kind of disagree with that. I think the best way to make whiskey is with pure, non-mineralized H2O, and that's exactly what we have here in Memphis. We have an artesian well system that's a couple million years old beneath the city, and so we have some of the purest drinking water on the earth, certainly in the country, and it's very, very low in mineral content. So we think that really attributes to the smooth finish and really allows you to taste all the various notes because there's no taste of the actual water or minerals. It's just pure H2O and the whiskey. Those are something I always want to harp up is our climate and the water that helps make it special. But lastly, just on the personal note, is I really appreciate having me on here, but we are a team and we are a startup in our mentality, and we really work off of a team approach. And our success has been due to not just me, but also our entire team. It takes an entire team from our accounting and finance team to our operations team and distillery team through marketing and sales to do this. And as of the day of this recording, we're in Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Kansas, Colorado, Illinois, New York, and Connecticut, and growing. So couldn't do it without the help of all these great folks around me.
That's awesome. And I hope Louisiana soon, huh? That's from what I hear.
Amen. Amen.
Man, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and just talking with us, getting, the inside scoop on these whiskeys and even a little bit more. Like, I had no idea. I knew the science behind the barrel, and smaller is not necessarily better. You can't really replace age, but I've never had it explained to me in that way. And I know my listeners are nerds like I am, and that was really, really cool to learn firsthand.
That was my Bourboneering, the engineering side of it. Yeah, it's pretty crazy because I don't think anybody knew when they made that barrel that what they were.
No,
they didn't know exactly. It just was through trial and error, right, that it hit. And there's something special about the oak, and that's what makes whiskey inherently a romantic product, is that you put it in the barrel and you just have to wait. And then again, that Mother Nature and time is actually changing the product. And one last thing on like the business side is name another business where your inventory, in our case, of course, the inventory is the barreled whiskey, appreciates in value. Like in any other industry, whether you're selling t-shirts, cotton, oil, widgets, typically it depreciates in value. Now, oil actually might not depreciate or appreciate other than the market impact, but most other commodities or goods depreciate in value as they age. So it's just, again, showing how unique this industry is, even from a business perspective. And that's what makes it so fun.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm doing a whole series on the engineering behind whiskey. From I've talked about from the growing of the crops to, I just recorded an episode about the actual distillation process. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I mean, this is an unique industry. I work in my day job in the chemical industry, and there's a lot of similar things, such as, obviously there's distillation, other chemical processes that you see in whiskey making, but it's totally different because it's missing the art that you see in whiskey making and, certain other spirits. But yeah, Thank you so much. So where can we find BR Distilling, social media or websites, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a group that we try to focus on our brands more than the actual distillery or parent company. So we do have a website, brdistilling.com. But you can follow us on social media a little closer through following our brand social media page. So you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Bluenote Bourbon or at Riverset Rye.
Yeah, that threw me off at first. I didn't realize, coming from the same his parent company, but then I've both brands are very active on social media and post awesome pictures on Instagram is mainly what I follow. And that's what threw me off. I didn't realize, it was under the same umbrella because they're both very separate, very much their own brands.
Yep. I mean, so you wouldn't think of it being odd from Heaven Hill, right? When they produced Larceny, Elijah Craig, or Evan Williams, but they've reached a scale of where you now associate them as different brands. So when you go to BlueNoteBourbon.com or RiversetRye.com, they are different. They're very similar. But ultimately, the goal is to build two distinct brands. Right now, in the growth trajectory and plan, we kind of have to pair the two together a whole lot to gain synergy, right, and to cut down on expense. But hopefully, as they grow, we can pull them apart, and they can really start to develop their own unique personalities in terms of brands and appeal to different audiences. And also, that allows us to do more variants and more SKUs. We have some really exciting things coming down the line. We have a cask strength single barrel version of Riverset that's coming out this fall. We have some exotic barrel aged finishes that are coming out under both brands, Riverset and Bluenote. That's going to be a super premium. It's a 10 through 15-year-old product mingled together and then finished in cognac, sherry, Madeira, port casks. And then we have some extra aged product, 18-year plus stuff coming out under Bluenote. But so by having the two different brands, it really allows us to be even more creative and not have to worry about what we do with one impacting the market perception or anything with the other brand. So it just ultimately gives us more freedom to explore, create, and build.
That's awesome. I like the little inside scoop we have. That's very exciting. I'm definitely
Cool.
ready to try some different things for sure. But
Like
yeah.
I said, thanks for having me on because without folks like you, we wouldn't be able to build our brands or achieve success. So
Oh, I'm
thank you.
happy to do it. One of my goals is to share whiskey I like, whether it's, a big brand like Heaven Hill. Not obviously, they don't need me, but or especially highlighting, smaller brands that I like, that I enjoy, and that I think need to get their name out there for sure.
Well, thanks again.
Not that I have the biggest reach in the world, but any bit helps, I hope.
Yeah, no doubt, right? It's as there's an old saying that the way you build a big liquor brand is through, one taste, one bottle, one handshake, I guess, in a pre or post COVID environment. And then, one retailer, one customer, one bartender at a time. So it literally takes just that incremental build, right? And that organic growth. So this is how it's done. And I really appreciate it. Would love to come back on the show at another time if you want to talk about something more specific or just a catch up.
Awesome,
So
for
thank you.
sure. Yeah, especially when y'all get some new releases out here, I would love to have you on and talk about those for sure. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here with us, walking me through all this, and taking the time. And thanks everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Cheers.
Cheers. Stay safe. Bye.
Thanks for listening, guys. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure you subscribe on whichever player you're using. Leave a comment and leave a 5-star review if you can. Once you've done that, go follow me on Instagram at Bourboneering or on Twitter at InBourbon, or go like our Facebook page, Bourboneering. All this, as well as my Prestige Decanter affiliate link and a link to sign up for a weekly newsletter, are all below. Thanks for listening, everybody. Cheers.